What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Lindsay O'Donnell of Piquant Marketing. You can check them out at piquantmarketing.com. Lindsay, before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out other episodes of the podcast people should check out. Some of the fan favorites, this is part of the top agency series, actually. Jason Swank. Jason Swank talked about how he built his agency up to 8 figures and sold it. And then he actually has another episode that he's been buying up agencies. So we talk about the valuation space, M&A space, the agency space. He actually has a group for agency owners to support them. He kind of created it because he wished he had that group when he started his agency. So that was an interesting episode. Todd Taskey was a good one where he helps pair private equity with agencies. So he helps sell agencies, and he has a Second Bite podcast. So sometimes he finds when an agency sells to private equity, then private equity sells again. Sometimes they make more on the second bite than they do on the first. So it was interesting. I never really thought about it, like that. Lindsay is selling and then still working the business and doing what you love. So I love his kind of philosophy, mentality, and that was a good one as well. Many more on InspiredInsider.com. And this episode is brought to you by Rise 25. At Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect their dream relationships, partnerships. How do we do that? We do that by helping you run your podcast. And we're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do the strategy, the accountability, and the full execution. So Lindsay, we call ourselves kind of the magic elves that run in the background and make it look easy for the hosts. They can create amazing content, create amazing relationships, most importantly, run their business. For me, the number one thing in my life is relationships, and I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I have found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and the companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, go to rise25.com or email us at support@rise25.com. I'm excited to introduce Lindsay O'Donnell. She was the owner and founder of Piquant Marketing, which is a digital marketing agency that's worked with over 100 brands around the world. She now runs Piquant Consulting, where she offers coaching and consulting to entrepreneurs looking to break into 7 figures. We'll talk about her journey, her pivot, and the evolution of the business. So, Lindsay, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's a PQ Consulting, but
PQ Consulting, yes.
But yeah, if you search,
I figured I wanted to say Piquant because of the Piquant Marketing, but yes,
you nailed it.
Well, let's talk about right now what you did with Piquant Marketing, and then we'll talk about what you do with PQ Consulting.
Yeah, absolutely. I never know how far back to go, but let's go a little ways back. I was like a big activist at Greenpeace. I had my own nonprofit, Sea Shepherd. Like I was the person protesting outside of Parliament. And when in my career, I went to school for marketing, and then I got a job at Whole Foods Market, and it was like everything clicked. Like I had found my people. They were creating change in the world through brands, like small brands, local brands, whether it be fair trade, sustainability, or, animal rights, whatever it was. And so
what was your position there? What were you doing?
It was called a marketing team leader. So back in the day, each store had an entire team. Like I worked at one store that did really well, and I had a team of 7 just for that store, which was amazing. We had like sign makers and graphic designers and a chef. And it was like, it was the best boot camp I've ever experienced. And it was really fun. But after 4 years, they were evolving and they were centralizing and they did some layoffs. And I'd kind of reached as far as I was going to go there. And I was like, I just want to keep doing that. Like I loved all the marketing. I knew the food business. I knew the retailers. I knew the food businesses. I knew the influencers. Like I knew the restaurants and the community groups. And so I just wanted to keep doing that. And so I had a partner at the time who was also from Whole Foods. She stayed around for about a year, but we built Piquant Marketing as a digital marketing agency. Ultimately, until late last year, I had a team of I think at the most I had a team of 12. And we did everything from like social media marketing, event planning, influencer marketing, digital ads, email marketing, content creation. And it was really, really fun and rewarding.
Let's talk about the evolution of the services for a second. So you learn a lot from Whole Foods. You're like, I like doing this marketing piece. I'm going to serve these, brands that are, Whole Food like, sustainable, all of that. So what was the first services you offered, and how'd you get your first client?
Okay, this is actually kind of a fun story. I think so. When you first start, there's a lot of imposter syndrome, particularly for like an agency, because you could always do more, right? You look at all these big agencies and you're like, oh my God, like I don't do SEO and like I don't have a big studio. But the thing to remember is that like there's a customer for every price point. Like not all brands need a really slick, flashy brand, and sometimes it works against them. So when we started, I didn't know what our main service was going to be because we kind of did it all, but we couldn't seem to get our foot in the door. We couldn't seem to get even people. I just was just like, hey, I just want to say hi because I'm in the food community. People were really shut down. They were like, we don't want to be sold to. So what we did was we did a digital potluck, which was I had done this before as a blogger where everybody posts at the same time on the same day, the same hashtags, and you tag the person before and after you. And then everyone agrees that when they post, they'll spend 15 minutes engaging with all the other posts. Right. So I think the first time we did it, we had 100 or 150 people sign up, including brands. And that like really put us on the map. It helped like big brands that wouldn't even answer our emails before were like, hey, we want to be on this potluck. And then all of a sudden we knew the influencers in the space. They knew us. We did gift bags and giveaways. Like it was this big free event, but everybody got what they wanted, which was like a higher profile. They wanted engagement and they wanted to be connected with each other. And so I think our first client came from like me networking, but that really was like
How do you
the
vet them? I'm
momentum.
curious. I love the idea because it's everyone's kind of helping each other, and that's kind of just foundationally like how I think. And
Yeah.
so how do you vet companies or people? And I'm curious, how do you police it, right? Because some people may not follow it, and that's kind of unfair to everyone else. So how did you vet companies?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, it was really labor intensive, so it was worth it. Like would I have done it later in my agency? No, because it was so labor intensive.
Yeah.
So what happened was like a lot of it was outreach, and us having to outreach over and over and be consistent, like an event, like RSVP, this kind of thing. But I will say that like once it was published, people were using the hashtag, which was fine. But if you were in the potluck, which meant that you were in the original list and you were entered for prizes and somebody was tagging you, like you had to be vetted by us. And I don't think we really like the second time we did it, we sort of had people that were like not the best fit, but we were pretty clear as an agency that we were a food marketing agency. So it's not like we got like dental offices or anything like that. But it was interesting, like like after we posted it, people were using the hashtag Vancity virtual potluck on their own. So we were pretty clear, like with the invite and who we were. We were pretty clear. I mean, we couldn't help it when people were using the hashtag later, which was totally fine. It just meant like, they were just sort of like catching the outer ripple of it.
So walk me through it first. Give me an example, like what was posted and then what would people have to do?
So people had a few different options. It was a virtual potluck, which makes sense because we're a food marketing agency. So you had to post something food related, be it a recipe, food inspiration, or a kitchen hack. And it got too big, but what we originally were trying to do, because the potlucks that I had participated in, you would block all the appetizers together and all the mains together. So we tried to do that and then all the kitchen hacks. So what would happen is like the reason it was so labor intensive is like you would have a spreadsheet of 150 influencers and brands, and they would tell me like, okay, I'm doing a recipe, an ice cream recipe. I'm doing like a
Where are
knife
they
sharp.
posting? Are they posting it like Instagram? Like where is it going?
It was Instagram.
Instagram. Okay. So everyone
Yeah.
posts on Instagram separately on their own account, and then else has to go in and engage with everyone's posts, pretty
And they
much.
could do it easily. We would email them and be like, this is the person before you, and this is the person after you, like a menu. So if you were posting, you'd say like, hey, you might have come from this person's page where they did like a blueberry pie. Now I'm doing like an ice cream recipe, and don't forget to check this person after. And all that, because no one knew about the event until we published it. Like we told them, just click on the hashtag and engage for 15 minutes. So that made it easy too.
Got it. So they don't have to necessarily go in and comment on every single person's post, but spend 15 minutes and get in and out and see what you can do as far as engaging with everyone else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that idea. It's really kind of forming a community around that. And so you were saying doing that, you had some inquiries from your first clients.
Yeah. It really, influencers too, like at the time, there was a lot of food influencers trying to trying to build and trying to make connections themselves. And so we had some strong connections with influencers, and that was really helpful for us. So I guess to answer your question with the service, we ended up doing social media and influencer marketing first. Like that was kind of like our big package. That was the thing we were known for. And it was easy because when we went and pitched a brand, we were like, we know the influencers. We know which ones will work. We know the ones that will like respond to emails, that'll give you high value. Like we knew them intimately, that we instantly knew who's going to give them who good value and who would be the best fit. And we knew like we're in Vancouver, and we eventually like grew, across Canada in the sense of like influencers we worked with, but we knew Vancouver influencer, that community so well. So even some of like Ben and Jerry's actually reached out. We didn't end up working with them, but at one point they reached out and they were like, can we do a Vancouver event? Because we knew the healthy foodies, we knew the greasy spoon foodies, we knew the restaurant foodies, we knew the nutritionists, like we knew that community inside and out.
So how would an influencer campaign work? Did you put together the deal? I'm sure the influencers appreciate it too because you're bringing them brands.
Yeah. Yeah, so it varied. Like if you were doing a digital event, so we did everything from like in-person events to digital events to ambassador programs. And we like through my marketing too, one thing through the research I found before building the company was I found agencies often didn't have a great marketing presence themselves because they're so busy, right? But that was really something we wanted to do. So in our marketing, I was like educating the influencer. I was giving them insider tips. So they trusted us. And so we would have people coming to us like wanting to be on a wait list or just being in our contact list. And so, yeah, it's, we would educate on like, hey, if you don't have any money, this is what you can expect when you're just sending free product. And we kind of had a list of people who we knew would work for just product. We knew for people who would just be paid, but we also knew like, if you pay this person, it's worth it. And in events, like it's a community, right? If you're an influencer, you don't want to show up to an event and not know anybody. So we knew like the prom kings and queens, if you plan an event and you invited like these key people, the other ones would just flock to the event too.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So you started with, just helping the community,
Mhm.
and then you formed these relationships, and then the influencer marketing campaigns were really successful. From
Yeah.
there, it sounds like maybe people were asking you to do other things. So it sounds like you got into digital ads at one point, event planning, design, all of those things.
Yeah, I will say influencer marketing doesn't make, well, for us, it didn't really make a lot of money. However, it was the flashy, exciting thing where people were like, "Oh, who are you? You know these people." Like it was such a tiny percentage of money that came in was the influencer marketing campaigns, but it was such a game changer when we were sitting and meeting with people. Like the money really came from the social media, like ongoing management. But the fact that we could do that cheaply and do it ongoing without this like being a big thing for them, it was often like the most confusing things for brands on their own. So yeah, it was like, I don't know how to describe it. It was the same thing with the potluck. Like it was labor intensive, it's flashy, didn't bring in the revenue, but it brought in the people who needed the less sexy things done as well.
Yeah. I know I've heard you talk, Lindsay, about the initial days, and I'd love to talk about pricing. And
Yeah.
I've heard you say at one point, the companies we were working with then couldn't afford us anymore. So talk about the evolution of your pricing from the beginning and then as you matured.
I mean, it's embarrassing how little we charge because what happens is like, I mean, I was 30, but I was like, you feel like a kid when you start a business and you look at these agencies charging thousands and thousands of dollars a month to like run a Facebook page and you're like, oh my God, we can do that for so less, and then you're like, oh yeah, there's like programs and admin and like, this costs what it costs. So, I think like when we started, it was $500 for like two social accounts. And posting every other day. But that was like Instagram didn't have stories. It was just photos, and Facebook and Instagram, you could post the same thing.
I feel like every
And
agency I talk to has these stories where they're like, I charged $100 to do a website, and now I charge,
yeah,
tens of thousands or whatever it is. So,
yeah. And I remember like our first client, we did so much. And I remember them not being super happy. But I think that that's also like when you charge a little amount, people don't see a ton of value in what you do. So yeah. And like when we started too, we were like, our thing was like, we're for people who can't afford a full-time marketing person. So there's a mixture of like us getting better at what we're doing, understanding what things cost, but also like if you're in social media doesn't change, it grows. You know what I mean? Like social media doesn't be like, hey, we're not doing stories now. Now it's reels, or like, here's another thing. Oh, and now there's TikTok or now there's Snapchat or whatever. So, I think it also got to a point of like, oh, the audience that we were targeting, like that's not really the audience. I think that there were like we did different things like memberships or webinars or like these mini packages because we wanted to continue to accommodate them. But like, yeah, it was just a mixture of like, oh, well, like this costs what it costs. And if you're not ready to spend this amount, then you're kind of not our audience. So it was a mixture of like just not understanding what we were offering, the cost of it, being naive, social media changing, and then just like us getting better.
so how did that change over time? So obviously it started at 500. Then
Yeah.
what was the range as people, as you matured and took on larger clients?
Yeah, I mean, I think it got to the point where we kind of didn't do anything for less than 3,000 a month. And that could be like, I think 3,000 generally was like Instagram and TikTok. And that didn't even include content creation because it does, right? Like, and so what that would include is like, say they would send like for TikTok, we'd be like, okay, film these three things. We would edit it. We would do the video. We would do the captions and the engagement. So yeah, I think like if you wanted us to do like all the content creation, it was like $3,000 to $4,000 a month, which, I think that was also I started to have a feeling about the model because social media for me, it started to become like quality still there, but it was so much more about quantity. Like you kind of just have to be there to capture it and do all these things. And so I also just had like a really great team. And to do things properly, like, if you're doing a video, you want to cover and, you want to make sure that you've done like the alt text, like it takes a long time, and to do it right, it takes time.
We'll get into PQ consulting, but I do want to talk about niche, right? Because I know with the consulting, I mean, that's one of the things you do help people with, which is kind of discovering and exploring their niche.
Mhm.
So how did the niche change or evolve, and maybe it didn't with Piquant Marketing?
Yeah, that was challenging for us because I don't say challenging, but especially when you're starting, you don't want to say no to anything because you're like, I really need the money, you know? So for us, like we started in natural health CPG. So the best way I described it was like if you were in Whole Foods, you competed with Whole Foods or you partnered with Whole Foods, that was like kind of who we were. However, me and the majority of my team were vegetarian or vegan. And a lot of my brands partnered with me because I'm vegan. The thing about veganism, it's
Are
not
you
like
still vegan or no?
I'm still vegan.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. Because some
I've been,
people I know kind of go in and out of these
yeah,
things. So
yeah. I've been
I don't know
vegan
if
for
you've seen,
so
there's a video. Have you ever seen JP Sears's videos?
I don't think so.
Okay, I think you'd think it's funny.
Okay.
He's got a video that if meat eaters acted like vegans or something, and it's like a
Yeah.
spoof video. It's kind of funny.
I'm all for it. Like I'd like
Yeah.
let me tell you a side note, like vegans are the best, they're the most mobilized, but like we can be annoying. Like I see it both ways, you know?
I will
um,
pull. Go ahead. Keep going. But yeah, niche. I'll
listen,
pull it up and
um,
we'll take a quick look at it. But it's I think you'll find it's amusing, right?
I'm sure it will. I'm sure
Listen,
it will.
I'm very health conscious. I can see both sides. Here it is. It's that if meat eaters acted like
Oh,
vegans.
I have seen this guy. I
This
have
is
seen
eight. This was 8 years ago and 18 million views. It's comical.
I have seen it. I do like this guy.
Yeah. Uh,
Um,
so you start with the natural, and then the vegan specific community
so
um,
that's
came to
that
you.
that made it tricky for us because people like the thing about veganism is like it's values based, right? Like it's not like gluten free where you're doing it for like health. Like if you're vegan, it's because you believe like what's right or wrong, or because like you don't want to support an industry. So people would come to me and felt like their brand was really seen and I knew that community really well. However, then if you have like a brand that comes to you that's not vegan, like it's not just about like, oh, am I going outside of my niche? Like, am I going to be like betraying some of the clients that I've signed because they feel like I represent them? So for me, it was really like marketing wise, the niche was, CPG, natural health, mostly vegan, vegetarian, which is like super niche. The way I described it was like, listen, like I had someone come to me and they wanted me to like help with their snacks, which was like dried pig's ears. And I was like, I'm just not your person. Like, I don't
dried pig's ears.
Like, I don't know how to
That's
do
funny.
this, So that was tricky. And the way I found it was like,
I
if I
can't see
felt,
like a kombucha, like, oh, we work with kombucha and it's next to like a dried pig's ear. Yeah,
yeah. So I
very
had two,
different.
and we had so many conversations about this. Like, what is like, if we put on our website, like who we are and who we work with, how do we describe this? So the best way I would say it is like, listen, if you were a brand that was like what we called a conscious brand, then we would work with you. So like, if you were like, we had a restaurant that served a lot of meat, but they had vegan options, but they were doing so much for the community that we were like, listen, like if you're a conscious brand, then we work with you. And then for like, I had like a data security brand that wanted to work with me. And I was like, no problem. Just so you know, like you're paying for my learning curve. You know what I mean? Like I know strategy, I know ads, but like a food, like say a Facebook campaign, paid campaign on food, I immediately know if it's the photo. I know if it's the caption. I know who to go to. I like, you know what I mean? But if it's data security, you're paying for my learning curve. So we kind of just ended up saying like, if you were a conscious brand, it was kind of a case by case, but it was something we struggled with, honestly, because ours was like a value-based agency. Like the whole thing was started on trying to make the world a better place. A little bit more complicated than your average, like defining niche.
Yeah, so kind of went through that journey, Lindsay, for like, okay, everyone, because we need to like keep the doors open to natural health, to kind of more vegans just kind of coming out of the woodwork from the natural health, and then more conscious brands, kind of refined as conscious brands. It was kind of broader, but it encapsulates kind of more of your philosophy. Is that
Yeah,
accurate?
definitely. It's still food, but yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then maybe we'll with the PQ.
Mhm.
I don't know, and you don't have to mention names specifically, but talk about maybe an example where you help someone explore their niche and where they're at and where they maybe should or want to go.
Yeah, I would say this is one of the most common challenges, is people not understanding their audience. And so I have a couple examples, but one, I'll say like when I like now that I'm doing consulting, it's so much more broad. We're looking at like different areas. But when I was at the agency, the most common mistake I saw was people trying to appeal to everybody. And everyone hears this and they're like, yeah, no, I know, that's the worst. But let me give like an example in the vegan community, right? Everyone wants to be the Beyond Meat. They're like my dad, Mr. Boomer, who has steak for breakfast, has had Beyond Meat. You know what I mean? Like, and he doesn't eat anything green for breakfast. And everyone's just like I had so many brands that were launching and they were created to offer a meat alternative or a dairy alternative or whatever. And they're like, well, we don't want to turn away people who might just be like into it. And I'm like, you're trying to copy Beyond Meat. Let me tell you, Beyond Meat always started in the center of the ripple. Like I knew when Beyond Meat was getting investment, our community knew when it was coming to Canada, and everyone was so excited about it that it eventually rippled out to my dad. And so I will say, like, most common problem I saw at the agency was people trying to appeal to everybody, and you just end up with like, it's like, what's the best example of the segues, right? They tried to appeal to everybody when they should have just been like, hey, we're great for hospitals. Because eventually you get like you go to the center of the ripple and you go really a really concentrated niche and it will ripple out. Like they'll like if you look at me as a vegan, you'll convince my mom who's vegetarian. And then eventually it'll get to my dad. But that's like the number one mistake I see with niches that I saw with the agency was people like it's fear-based, it's scarcity-based. Like we have to appeal to everybody. And then you're just like, well, nobody feels that passionate about it.
Yeah, I totally have seen that. And people, like you said, have discovered brands when it's like that kind of beyond the ripple. But a lot of them we don't realize start as a really specific home niche. I mean, the example I remember having one of the founders of RX Bar on the podcast. Now, everyone eats RX Bar. I mean, a lot of people. But back then, it was literally they focused on CrossFit people.
Yeah.
And they really honed in on CrossFit people. And then from there, it rippled, across. But people don't realize, if they look at it now, they don't, some people don't realize it started with at the CrossFit,
Yeah.
because people are
Yeah. Totally
passionate.
agree.
Yeah. So I totally can see that. So we're talking about PQ consulting for a second. Obviously, niche is what's another common thing that people come to you with?
So people are often, so I went from the agency to consulting, and people are often 2 steps ahead of where they should be. They'll ask me about like their niche. They'll be like, I think I need to be on social. I need to fix my personal brand. And it's like, that's actually not the problem. I would say the problem generally is a lack of knowing your why, your positioning, and your brand voice. And all of that should fall into place. So, for instance, like, if you know your why, then you know your audience. And I think people we're transitioning from, okay, my niche is like women 35 to 45 who are into yoga. And it's like, no, my niche is into like environmental activists or CrossFits or whatever, right? So when I'm doing the consulting, often people will say, like, I don't really know my audience or they're not responding. And it's like, let's take it way back. Like, why did you start this company? Like, what's the transformation you're offering? And I think once you figure out your transformation and your why, you can get an idea of the state your target audience is in right now. Like, I'm dealing with people with gut health issues, or I'm dealing with like, stressed out boomers or whatever. And so I think people try and cultivate a niche based on nothing, just what they think, right? Instead of actually going to the transformation and the actual reason that they started the company. And I think we do this a lot. We're like, oh, I think I need to get on social and do these things that other people are doing. And you're like, you're just kind of pulling this out of thin air because you think you should, instead of actually like the why and your transformation should dictate everything that you do.
What was the point for you, Lindsay, that you're like, I need to pivot what I'm doing. I have a agency and my true passion really lies in consulting.
Yeah. So I'm going to say something kind of controversial.
Go
So
for it.
I had like an amazing year a few years ago, like raining money. It was so fun. And I loved what I was doing. And then things like kind of flatlined. I mean, I had some personal stuff, but I started to have this feeling. I was like, I don't think it's me. And I started to have this feeling about the model and the industry, the food industry. And I hired, like, I was doing all the right things. Like I know people can relate. Like I did the rebrand. I did the free events. I was doing the freebies, the marketing, like, and I was like, just do things for fun. Like goal setting, all that stuff. I even hired like a very expensive marketing coach. And I knew the information he was giving me was extremely valuable, but it wasn't moving the needle. And he said, why don't you write a white paper? He's like, there's all these businesses that you want to work with, and they're kind of not really listening to you. Like they don't want to be pitched. Reach out and ask to write a research paper. And I was like, oh, like the food industry in Canada is facing a lot of challenges, small to mid-sized. And I mean, I could get into that, but I was like, okay, like hunch number one confirmed. Like it's not me. I think that there's generally food businesses are facing a ton of challenges. And the second was like, I think it's the model, like the way social is evolving. And I just, you know what? I love my team. They're so talented. I still like work with them in different ways. I was like, I feel like by the time the marketing is done, it's not what I'm preaching. Like I'm like, when it comes to marketing, I think you need to really go for it. I think you need to really know your brand voice. And it wasn't for my team or the clients. It was just a mixture of like budget and like I couldn't control things. And once I was done writing that white paper, I just didn't feel the need to like rebrand the agency. I didn't feel the need to pivot that way and be like, hey, like we're now focusing on like plastic surgeons or whatever. Like it was time for me to strip back. I really loved the one-on-one. I loved the like fractional CMO work. And I really loved the coaching. And at the time I had like on a whim also taken an intuitive coaching course, which is like all about like pulling the thread, which is what you do in marketing, right? Like, you're like, why did you start it? Okay. Why did it transform your life? Blah, blah, blah. And I started to see like the middle of the Venn diagram of the intuitive coaching and the marketing, where it's like really great marketing and really successful entrepreneurs go back further than what's my niche, what's my tactics. They go back to like, okay, like as a kid, I really loved this, and this was my transformation. So that's sort of like how we ended up pivoting, was the 2 hunches and then sort of like discovering the intuitive part of the coaching.
What was the hardest part? Because, I know identity sometimes is in what we do,
Yeah.
what was the hardest part about unwinding or going to the team and being like, here's actually my true calling?
Yeah, I mean, I think they knew. I have a really great integrator, and I feel like most entrepreneurs know what that is, right? She had like for a while had been like telling the team like, oh, like Lindsay needs a sabbatical, or like they could just kind of tell, right? And I was frustrated because we just weren't growing, and we like it'd been a couple of years of like good years, but I couldn't break through these goals. So I don't think anyone was really surprised. But in terms of the identity, it is like I had like wanted to sell the agency and it didn't really work out. I'd say now the biggest challenge is explaining to people what I do, because it's not like you're I'm an intuitive marketing coach, but if you say I own a digital marketing agency, that's pretty self-explanatory. I would say like when I give people 20-minute sessions, or sometimes I do free hour sessions, like the breakthroughs are profound and amazing, and people leave entirely energized and with a clear roadmap. But I haven't been able to find like a tagline of like, this is what I do. And so there's been a lot of like, been doing like a lot of free sessions, a lot of explaining, but the big challenge is sort of like not only explaining to people, but me settling into like, okay, this is what this is. And I will say, the other thing I'll say that's been very, very challenging is marketing an agency is all about marketing. That's like a fire hose, right? Like you're doing ads, you're doing social. And with what I'm doing now, it's so much more about one-on-one connections and experiences and networking. And so it's hard for me not to like lean back into like, okay, get on TikTok and like do a freebie. And it's like, no, this is more like there's fewer people that are going to be my target audience. They're the business owners and like the entrepreneurs that want to go from 6 figures to 7 figures. And so it's a much more like intentional sales strategy instead of like a fire hose marketing, if that makes sense.
Are you still focused on conscious brands, or who are ideal right now clients for you from the consulting standpoint?
So I feel like I'm still someone who's like not going to work with like a pig ear chips, that's not me. So I will say that I'm working with all sorts of brands. Like I have a surf school client. However, like I still know everything about the food industry. I still love the health industry. So I basically, if you're an entrepreneur that's like really looking to level up and you're like spiritual and conscious and you're constantly looking at your participation, your mindset, then you're my target audience. Um, but if you do own a food brand or a wellness brand, like I really know that industry particularly well as well. So I would say like the fractional CMO work. So I'm doing coaching, consulting, fractional CMO, like that. I can still bring my team in. That still fits really well.
I always like to hear with companies and how their offerings work from the beginning to the end. And you mentioned before about a free session. Walk me through how typically it would work to work with you, and how people kind of go through the offerings.
Yeah. So there's two ways in which people meet me. They either book a free 20-minute session, which you can do at any time, or I've been going on LinkedIn and saying like I have 5 free 1 hour sessions. And so people, I say just come with any problem. Like come to me with like I hate my husband. Come to me with I can't find my niche. Come to me with like I can't find my brand voice, or I hate my job. And by the end of it, like there's usually we pull the thread. There's a couple ways in which it goes. Like some people, it's like really easy. Like you haven't done email marketing, you haven't done this. And some people, I can tell the question isn't really the question. So I had a guy come to me who he had a brand and he was like, I can't find my niche. And I could tell, I was like, this isn't the question. And by the end of it, he was like, I think I need to be in stand-up comedy. I was like, yeah, I know. So it's like there's no boundaries to it, which makes it really profound. And then after that session, there's three options. People like if you're a brand and you're like, I don't have these templates and tools, I come in as a fractional CMO. That's a custom quote. So that's what I'm doing for a few companies. Then for some people, they're like, I want to meet with you every 2 weeks. Like if you're a high level entrepreneur, brand owner, you are constantly faced with mindset challenges, obstacles, personal challenges, but also business challenges. And you need a safe space to like be like, okay, this person isn't working out. Should I fire this person? Also, my friend is driving me crazy. And we can like tie together like what's triggering you and how to move forward in your business, right? To move that blocks. So some people want to meet with me every 2 weeks. And then the other is like, you can just book an hour with me. If you're like, I'll touch base with you after I get investment, that's fine. So I'm basically like a high level senior marketing director and coach. And you can decide if it's like you want me to like come in as a temporary team member or somebody that you touch base with regularly.
I know we were talking before we hit record about the doctor example. Was that the stand-up comedy one, or is that something different?
No, no,
Oh,
no.
oh, talk
Yeah.
about Dr. Divi.
Yeah, Dr. Divi is actually she's the person who trained me as an intuitive coach, and she's someone who like really performs miracles. And basically, like she was going to get to 7 figures, no problem. But I knew I could see it was going to be whiplash, like because a lot of people do that. They grow, they grow, they grow, but she had one team member. And so I knew she was going to get to 7 figures or whatever your personal goal is going to be. Like I knew, but then burnout and whiplash right back. And so what we did was I came in and was like, okay, by the time I'm done, you will be doing the same, if not less work, but it'll be systemized, there'll be processes, and it'll be effective. So, I come in and I write a marketing plan, I do a social media outline, I help her hire the right social person, I bring in an integrator for her. I did flow charts. So I was like, when you do a launch, it should look like ABC. When you have meetings, this is how it should look. When your social person comes to you, they should have this report and they should need this from you, but you should do ABC. Like it basically comes in from like a bootstrap business to me coming in and being like, okay, this will allow you to stay at 7 figures and keep growing. And so that's been really rewarding because her brand is really fun.
What are some of the groups and coaches that have been valuable for you?
Oh, that's a really good question. I just discovered School. I don't know if you've heard of it, SKOOL.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's one that I actually have that I just started. It's called Quantum Coaches. Dr. Divi has one as well. Something I discovered with my coach was I came to him and I was really frustrated and I was like, I'm doing all the things. I'm like networking, I'm getting out of the house, I work from home. And he was like, no, you're not actually having intentional co-working spaces. So I had to create some local groups where it was my peers, where we're not going to slip into something personal. I would meet with my team, our friends, and it would slip pretty quickly into like just personal updates. So I had to create some like local cohorts where it was like I knew that I would just be hearing about like the new AI programs that they're using, the new like tools or the onboarding that they were using. So I have a few like women's groups that I have locally. So I'd really recommend like some smaller groups where you're just going to absorb like the things that they're doing, where it doesn't just like spiral into personal updates, which is fun.
I know that you would done a lot of events and gone to events. I'm curious what some of your favorites are, maybe in the food industry. I saw, the Planted Expo on
Mhm.
there. Maybe talk about that, and then any other food related or industry events that you have found to be valuable.
Yeah. So if you're in food, I always tell people to follow Ali Ball. She was like a very nice, hers is BizWiz or it's Ali Ball. She was a really nice compliment in the sense of like, she used to be a food buyer and she offers programs. And I've heard nothing but rave reviews about like, she coaches you on like, this is when you approach a buyer. This is like how many times you follow up. This is the season to do it. She's got a podcast. She's fantastic. In terms of shows, there's like CHFA, which is like the Canadian Health Food Association. And that is like an industry event. That is where you go and meet like the buyers, like the retailers, all of those things. I know in the States, the Natural Health Food Show is really big, as well as the Fancy Food Association. And all of those, I believe, do have
I
things like
want to
web,
go. That's on my list. I want to go to Expo
right?
West at some point. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And then Planted is one of my favorites. So we were brought on as an agency, and then after a year of like having great success with them, I was asked to be a small partner. And what I love about that is like it's such a fun challenge where you have to target vendors and sponsors as well as attendees, and you have to market it all year round when you only have like 3 days a year to like capture content, or 3 days a year in which you're building something up. And so when we came in, they came to us like just after COVID. They had new owners and they were like, hey, like people are kind of nervous about coming. People don't have a ton of budget. How do we do this? And the way I looked at it was like, we need to like move the needle a little bit. So people are at a tipping point where they're like, hey, we could come or not. Like, how do we make it so wildly valuable that people are like, we have to be there? So we started doing things year round to like cultivate and nurture vendors, like webinars on how to show up at trade shows, like tricks for marketing, how to retarget attendees through ads. So we would like create this funnel, and through that we could bring in sponsors for the webinars, things like that. And then we also cultivated long-term relationships with the influencers who were going to be at the event, right? So we started doing things like giving them tips on how to make the most, how to get a bigger audience by covering Planted. And so we wanted it to create like a community where we were like, hey, like we want to raise it's like the digital potluck. How do we have all boats rise with the tide? And so the first year we did that, we had a lot of success. I think attendance was up 30% the first year we did it. And through that too, they went from 1 show to 3 shows a year. So we also had to create systems and tools to really scale. Like they'll have like 100 to 150 influencers per event. Sponsors and vendors, all of them need shout outs, all of them like need newsletter mentions in addition to like whatever. So that was really fun and challenging of like, how do we create like something that's like systemized, but is also creating that like sense of like community and personalization.
I'd love to hear, Lindsay, some of your favorite brands. I don't know if we break it down by category, like kombucha and coffee and whatever. What are some of your favorites that you like? I always like discovering new products.
Yeah. I mean, I always talk about Midday Squares. I love what they're doing. They're really fun. And what I like is one of my favorite things in marketing is to be like, we're the this of this. You know what I mean? Like we're the Michael Jordan of yogurt. I don't know. And so their whole thing is their chocolate.
I've never tried Midday Squares before.
It's really yummy. I've met one of the owners a few times, Jake, and he's lovely. But their whole thing is like they're a reality show. And their funnel is very clearly defined, right? Like they don't actually sell you on the bars until you get on their newsletter. Like if you go to their social, it's about storytelling. And it's like, we're building this together. Their why is so clearly defined. So their website is much more sales-based. But if you go to their social, like you can tell like they're going to be like a reality show. And when I met Jake, he was like, we're the Spice Girls of the food industry. And I love that. I love that so much. So that's one that's really fun. Not a new brand that you can discover, but one that seems to consistently innovate and be surprising is Heinz. And I talk about them a lot on my social. Like they're partnering with Kate Spade. They partnered with Fenty and Rihanna. Like it's unexpected. It's really fun. And a lot of the things that they're doing aren't going to drive like initial sales. Like they did a limited partnership with Rihanna and Fenty, and that activation didn't drive a ton of sales, but they had international press. So I think that that's really interesting. There was a brand recently called Pure Sport where they sent influencers empty boxes at Christmas, and they were like, fill it up with all the product that you haven't used. And we will then send it to charity. And again, like that probably didn't cost that much. That clearly wasn't going to drive sales. Like on the surface, it's not going to drive sales. And yet it got international press. So I really like that as well. And then like Liquid Death is always doing fun things. And then Smashed, which is a drink, a non-alcoholic drink from Zayn from One Direction, is also doing really fun things. Smashed, their whole thing was around the intern. So the intern has built this like huge social following by being like, help me not get fired. And George, like now it's like a big trend on social to be like, okay, if we do this, my boss is going to buy me a Ski-Doo or whatever it is. But they're all doing really, really fun things. And that's like marketing should be fun. Even if you're like doing funeral homes, it should be smart. It should be fun. Like we're inundated with messaging and like calls to action. At least don't insult my intelligence, like have something interesting or fun. And so I really like all those brands. And then finally, one that I talk about a lot that I think balances that conscious brand really, really, really well is Ben & Jerry's. Like they say we're a social activism brand, and the way they balance like social justice on their socials and with what they do and their collaborations with the fact that they're just fun ice cream, that's a really like they've balanced that so well.
Lindsay, this has been fantastic. I appreciate you walking us through the journey, the lessons. There's so many gold gems here. I want to encourage people to check out your website and what you're doing. Where should we point people towards to learn more?
I would say my LinkedIn or Instagram is best. The Piquant Marketing website's still up. You can check it out, but it will be moving to PQ Consulting. So if you go to pq.consulting on Instagram or Lindsay K. O'Donnell on LinkedIn, like those are the places I'm really active right now. The website will be coming soon. I just switched in the last month from the agency to consulting, but I'm very active. I'm doing a lot of like sessions and like onboarding. So now
I'm sure if they go to Piquant Marketing, it will redirect to PQ Consulting at some point. So they can check that out. But pq.consulting would be the website. Got it.
Yeah.
Cool. Lindsay, thank you so much. And we'll see everyone next time. Thanks, everyone.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I feel like 100 grand.